Chapter 25. What a Rat. And thanks to my betas, Darreldeem and Alex33, checking this over. All mistakes are my own, especially since I have a bad habit of adding things and not sending it back to them. And oops, I sent Myrtle on in the last chapter, but then realized I would need her later, so I changed that. Sorry for the confusion. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP November 1, 1991. It was the next night, and Gary was sitting on his bed. He had already talked to his parents and Harry. Now he just wanted to lay down with his crystal and go to sleep. But he couldn't. It was his night with Sally, and she would be here any minute. Gary, all your dorm mates are asleep. Come on. Quietly, Sally said from the doorway, making a follow-me motion with her hands. Gary nodded, grabbed his mirror, his map, and his wand. He then followed Sally down to the common room. There were still a few people hanging about. One was Hermione. Not wanting to sneak out when the room was occupied, he went and sat across from her and gave a nod in greeting. "Why are you up so late?" the bushy-haired girl asked, laying down the book she was reading onto her lap. "Just wanted to sit by the fire." "I could ask you the same," Gary replied, making a show of warming up by the blazing fire. It was actually cold in the room, so it was a good enough excuse. "Doesn't your room have a stove?" "Ours does, and it keeps the room warm enough," Hermione asked, tilting her head to the side in confusion. She thought all the rooms were the same. "Of course it does, but there is nothing like looking into the flames of an open fire," Gary defended, still looking at the fire. He then turned to her so as to not seem rude. "Oh, well, yes, I guess I understand that. Thanks, by the way, for sticking up for me and Harry about the article. It can't have been easy to disagree with your friends," Gary said with a heartfelt voice, sincerity showing on his face and in his expressive eyes. "That is okay," Hermione said with a blush staining her cheeks. "It was no bother. I just don't understand why Ron is so adamant that you play Quidditch. I can't seem to make him understand that studying and family are important. You'd think with a family as large as his he would understand that. I don't either. I never showed that I wanted to play. Me and Ron have been friends for years. Well, we were. We went to the same Muggle school. He used to hang out at our house and play with me and the gang. I'm not sure what happened, but once we got to Hogwarts, he and Seamus just stopped hanging around us. I think it has something to do with some of the people in our study group being from Slytherin," he said with a shrug, knowing full well that that was the reason, but not wanting to badmouth his ex-friend to Ron's new friend. He still felt bad about losing 2 mutineers. "Well, that's just stupid," Hermione said, flopping back on the chair and crossing her arms at the absurdity of boys. "You didn't answer my question. Why are you still up?" Gary asked, changing the subject. "Oh, well, I didn't know it was this late until you came down. I must have got caught up in my reading. I'm reading one of the books Professor Watts recommended, the one that tells of the Dark Lord. You're in here, you know. Only a sentence or two, but it is your name," she said excitedly, bouncing in place. She always wanted her name in a book. Gary looked at her blandly and said, "Yes, I know. Aren't you excited that your name is in print?" she asked in a very confused voice. "No," he answered. Hermione's face took a crestfallen look. She looked thoughtfully at the book, then at Gary, and wondered why he would react like that. "Look, I'm sorry I was short with you, but fame isn't everything people make it out to be. Besides, my parents have been trying to tell people for years that they have no idea who got hit with the curse that night," he explained, not wanting to further alienate the girl. Hermione perked up at this bit of information. "Really? Well then, why do all the books say it was you?" "Dumbledore," came the short answer, like it was supposed to answer everything about the situation. It did, to the Potters and the mutineers, but not to an outsider. "Well, if he says it must have been you, then maybe he knows. Why would he say it unless it was true? He wasn't even there. Look, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Just don't believe everything you read about me, okay?" Gary said, looking back to the fire and ending the conversation. Hermione harumphed, grabbed up her book, and stomped up the stairs to the girls' dorm. Gary glanced around the red and gold common room and noticed that everyone was getting ready to go to bed. Percy reminded him not to stay up late as he too went up the stairs. Gary waited a good 10 minutes before he followed Sally out the door. They made it to the room of requirements. Sally had found the room with the help of the founders, and she and the boys used it for training. The room they chose was nothing special, just a large open room with gym mats on the floor and walls. There were various items scattered about, like chairs, books, rocks of all sizes and statues, to use as shields or weapons. Sally would stand to the side and watch as the room formed a dummy to start cursing Gary. She would shout encouragement or instructions on whether to duck or fight, which spell to use, or which item was best to use as a shield. Gary would wandlessly and wordlessly call the items to him or banish them to the dummy. He would dodge the spell fire or send spells back if he saw an opening. They worked out for about 2 hours, and then Gary asked the room to provide him with a shower. After he relaxed and cleaned himself off, he stood at the door and pulled out the map. It was way after curfew, and he didn't want to get caught. He took an extra careful look at the map tonight after his revelation about Rita yesterday and looked for yellow dots. Looking at the path to his dorm, he saw it was clear, and then he noticed it, a yellow dot, with the name of Peter Pettigrew. It was in his dorm. He racked his brain trying to figure out how. Ron's rat. Why hadn't they noticed before? Well, Ron never brought the rat to his house, so they would never have suspected that Scabbers was actually Wormtail. And they hadn't really been looking for Animagus before. Gary slowly, as to not drop it, pulled out his mirror with trembling hands. James Potter, he whispered in fright, not wanting to talk too loud, like Peter was in the same room as him. For all their training, the boys were still only 11 years old, and they knew they were not trained enough to take on an adult wizard. He had to repeat himself 3 times, getting louder with each call. Finally, his dad answered. Gary. The sleep-worn man asked, and then he gave a big yawn. Why are you calling this late? Dad, you need to call Madam Bones, Gary said shakily, the mirror vibrating in time with his unsteady hands. Now that he had his dad on the mirror, his knees gave out and he sank to the floor. That got James' attention. Why, are you and Harry all right? What happened? He asked, waking his wife to call the head of the DMLE. Peter Pettigrew is in my dorm, he answered a bit calmer now that he was sitting and had his dad talking to him. His parents will take care of this. What? James shouted, startling his wife. You could hear her asking what was wrong as she tried to wake Amelia. Yeah, I was on my way back to bed after training with Sally, and I remembered yesterday that Rita Skeeter might be an animagus, so I was keeping an extra lookout for that. That's when I saw Peter's name. Dad, I'm too scared to go to my room, but I can't stay here or someone will notice and ask why I'm out of my dorm. Gary explained, his voice still a little wobbly, but better, and his hands were steadier with each passing second he talked to his dad. Take a deep breath, son. Attaboy, just breathe deep. James coached him through until the color came back into his son's face. Look at the map. Is the coast clear? Sally was behind Gary this entire time, rubbing his back and giving words of encouragement. Yes, there's no one on this floor. Snape is 2 floors down and Filch is 3 floors up, Gary answered, his eyes trained on any part of the map not his room. Good, be quick and go to your common room. If you hear someone pretend you were asleep on one of the couches, James softly ordered. Okay, I can do this, Gary said out loud to himself, standing up and taking another deep breath. He put the mirror in his pocket, still activated, and he glanced at the map once again. He then quickly made his way to the dorm. He glanced around the halls, as if any second now the wanted man would jump out of the shadows and kidnap him. You're doing great, Gary. Quickly now, came the muffled advice from his pocket, even though his dad couldn't see a thing. Gary made it to the portrait of the fat lady who guarded the Gryffindor dorm, gave the password, and ignored her inquiry as to what he was doing out so late. He scrambled in the door and swiftly made his way to the couch he sat on earlier, taking deep breaths to calm his shattered nerves. Gary, came his mother's voice. Oops, sorry, Mum, Gary said, pulling the mirror from his pocket, and then remembered to put the security on. Gary, Amelia wants to know how we know, so we had to tell her about the maps. Don't worry, she has taken a vow not to reveal any of our secrets. Now, I want you to call her and show her his name on the map. She is waiting for you. When you're done, call us back, and we'll keep you company until someone gets there. We can't come. There is no logical reason that we can come up with for us to be there that we can give to the headmaster. Amelia can always say she got an anonymous tip. We can't, Lily said all in one breath. She knew sending the kids to Hogwarts would turn out to be dangerous. She was grateful for all the help and aids they came up with to protect them. She was also thankful for the years of logic training that made her son call them instead of rushing off to face someone he knew little about. Because, though Padfoot and Mooney told tales, they tried to leave Wormtail out as much as possible or downplayed his abilities. Peter had fooled them all before, so who knew just what he had hidden? She didn't want her baby to go against an adult, not yet. Gary took a deep breath and said, "Okay, Mum, I love you. I love you too, be careful. Call us right back. Done." And the mirror went blank. The poor, still slightly nervous, young man once again activated the security on the mirror. "Amelia Bones," Gary called, and noted it was answered immediately. "Mr. Potter, I hear you have a man that my department is looking for in your room," Amelia said, with a raised eyebrow. You could tell she was roused from her bed as well. Her hair was out of the tight bun she usually wore it in, and she was still dressed in her night clothes. "Yes, ma'am. Your parents told me you could show me his name on a map." "Yes, ma'am," he said again, and pointed the mirror to the still activated map and showed her everyone's name in his room. He then showed her where the headmaster was so she would see it was not a trick. "Thank you, Mr. Potter. I'll take it from here. I want you to call your parents back. Stay in the common room. Don't go upstairs for any reason. Do you understand?" She ordered in short and clipped sentences, already getting up to prepare to get a team together and go to Hogwarts. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, done." The mirror went blank once again, and Gary called his parents. They had sat and talked for about a half an hour when Sally told Gary that people were coming. He said a hurried good night to his parents, told them he would call them when it was over, signed off, hid the mirror in the special pocket, laid down, and pretended to sleep. The portrait opened, and you could hear quiet, arguing voices drift through. "My dear, I assure you there are no hidden criminals here at Hogwarts," the headmaster's voice stated as he, Madam Bones, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, and 6 red-robed auras came through the hole. "The wards would have let me know," he argued, and Gary could tell he was telling the truth. Maybe it was time to update the wards. The headmaster and Snape were still wearing the clothes they wore that day, so Gary could tell they hadn't been to bed yet. McGonagall, on the other hand, was dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown with a long and heavy robe, her feet covered with slippers and a sleeping hat upon her head. She did not look happy about being here at this hour. "I've already told you, Albus. I have to investigate. I received a tip that a wanted man was here, and I must clarify that," she loudly whispered back. You could hear the frustration in her voice, like she had been repeating the same thing since she got to the castle, and knowing Dumbledore she probably had. "Albus," the Transfiguration professor bit out, "it will not hurt to take a look. Do you really want to take the chance with the children's lives?" Dumbledore sighed in defeat and waved his permission to Amelia. Gary made a show of stretching and loudly yawning as if he just woke up in that play-acting way that only kids seem to be able to pull off. "What's happening? Mr. Potter, why are you in the common room and not in your bed?" his head of house asked. "I must have fallen asleep watching the fire," he said, blinking tired green eyes at her. "Young man, do you know if there is a rat in this dorm?" Madam Bones asked quietly, as if she didn't know exactly where it was. "Well," Gary said, tapping his finger on his chin as he pretended to think, an innocent yet confused look upon his face. "Ron has a pet rat, but I don't know if anyone else does. Why would you be looking for a rat? That is none of your concern, young man. You stay right here and let the adults do their job," Amelia softly ordered, with a sly wink. Gary's face just got more confused, but he slowly nodded to show he understood. The head of the DMLE then turned to her men. "I want every nook and cranny covered. We're chasing a rat, seal them with magic, if you know how. If he runs, try and stun him. No lethal spells. We're around children. If a student gets in your way, let the rat run to the next aura. I want him alive," she ordered in a harsh whisper. "You 3 with me, the rest of you stay here in case you're needed. If the children get up and come downstairs, corral them into one part of the room, away from the portrait. If this is who I think it is, then he might use the children as hostage. Don't let him get the chance." "Yes, ma'am," came the response from all 6 auras, wands at the ready. "Is this really necessary?" the headmaster questioned again. Amelia just rolled her eyes and started going quietly up the stairs, wand ready and her auras at her back. The headmaster and the professors followed. Gary didn't know what was going on upstairs, but after a few minutes there were shouts of he's running. "And don't let him get way. the students were heard saying. "What's going on?" And the running of feet sounded throughout the tower. Soon enough, students started coming down the stairs and were told to go to the far corner. Gary joined them. Ran's rat, Scabbers, scrambled down and stopped in fright at the sight of the three auras who had already sealed the common room. The students looked at the scene, whispering in confusion, and when Percy started forward to pick up Scabbers, he was ordered not to touch it. 7 shots of red light were seen going towards the rodent, but it moved just in time and headed to the kids, who, even though they didn't know what was going on, all shuffled to the side to keep the rat from getting in the middle of them. Many of the older students had their wands out as well. Gary quickly, wordlessly, and wandlessly shot off a lightless stunner. A barrage of red light flew towards the moving target. Students and auras, plus Gary, all fired stunners at the same time. Both his and one of the other stunners finally hit the rat, and it dropped to the floor in mid-jump. Gary smirked. "That'll leave a bruise." McGonagall transfigured a pillow into a cage, and Amelia floated the rat into it. "Well, now that is enough excitement for the night," Dumbledore said, turning to the still confused students. "I think, perhaps, it is time for you to return to your beds. I will make an announcement at dinner tomorrow to inform you of what you need to know." The students all went up the stairs grumbling and moaning that they once again didn't know what was going on. Gary went to his bed and gave a full-body shudder as to what he had been sharing his room with all this time. Why did they take Scabbers? I mean, what could they want with a common garden rat? The poor confused Ron asked, looking forlornly at his bed, missing his pet already. "I don't know." Gary lied his innocent mask firmly in place. "I was asleep when they came into the common room. I think I heard something about a wanted criminal, but I'm not sure." "That doesn't make sense," Ron said, shaking his head. "Well, Ron," Neville said thoughtfully, looking out of the corner of his eye at Gary and receiving a slight nod in return. "You know that the marauders were all animagus, right?" "Yeah, what about it?" "Ron, think. What type of animal was Pettigrew? And who would the DMLE be looking for in a rat form?" Neville asked, shaking his head at his ex-friend. They had all heard the story about the group of friends that terrorized Hogwarts with their pranks, so it was not hard to come up with that conclusion. "You can't mean that I've been sharing my bed with Pettigrew." The redhead all but shouted, his face and ears turning an alarming shade of red. "I don't know for sure, but that's what I think. It makes sense," Neville answered with a careless shrug and once more climbed into his bed. "Just think about it. I'm going to bed." And with that he closed his curtains and was seen no more that night. "I'm too," Gary mumbled, not offering his unwanted opinion, making sure he stayed as far away from the rumor mill as possible. He closed his curtains, pulled the mirror out of his pocket and called his mum. "Lily Potter." "Oh, Gary, are you all right?" she asked, quickly scanning her baby boy's face. "Yeah, they got him. I stayed in the common room like you guys told me to," he answered with a yawn. "Okay, sweetie, thanks for calling us and letting us know. Go to bed, it's late. Remember to turn on your crystal. You probably really need it tonight," she said softly, relieved that it was finally over. "Okay, Mum, tell Dad I love him." "Love you, good night," the tired young man replied as he rolled towards the crystal set up on the nightstand. Casting a silencing charm, he started the crystal, and as Pandora's voice filled the air, he heard, "Love you too, sweetie. Done." The mirror dropped onto the bed, and Gary fell asleep almost instantly. The next day at dinner, the headmaster did indeed make a short announcement. "I know some of you had a fright in Gryffindor Tower last night. I just wanted to say that the Department of Magical Law Enforcement has everything under control," he said after he got everyone's attention. He then sat back down. One thing the old man didn't seem to realize is that the less information he gave, the more children's imagination ran wild, and the scarier the rumors became. Those same rumors said that because it was the wards that were at fault and not the headmaster, then he was not to blame and was still just on probation. Gary had already told Harry what had happened as soon as he woke. They would mirror call the mutineers tonight and start a daisy chain letting everyone know what really happened. Also making sure that because of this, they really needed to keep a closer eye on those maps. They would let them know Gary's theory about Rita so that they would not be caught unaware if she was around. Maybe they should set up a schedule so that at least one mutineer was watching the map at all times. It was something to vote on. Chapter 26. The Ongoing Hunt. And thanks to my beta, Darreldeem, for checking this over. All mistakes are my own, especially since I have a bad habit of adding things and not sending it back to him. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP December 3, 1991. Once again the hunters gathered at the Potter Manor. And once again the meeting started with Augusta. I have learned a lot about Tom Riddle. I know that he graduated at the top of his class and received an award to the school for turning in Hagrid for opening the Chamber of Secrets. The poor man never even had a trial. They were just so happy to find a scapegoat for the death of young Myrtle that they simply expelled him and snapped his wand. The Longbottom matron said. You could actually hear the pity in her voice. I was out of Hogwarts by then and only heard rumor that there was a death and that the person responsible was caught. If I had known, I would have fought for a trial. Lily reached across the table and gathered the withered old hand of the slightly distraught woman. You couldn't have known, she said in a consolatory voice, gently patting the hand. I don't think anyone did. Besides, it probably wouldn't have done any good. Anyone with half an eye can tell Hagrid is a half-giant. If you had asked for a trial, it would have been denied. I know. I just feel like I should have paid better attention. Now that I think about it, and knowing what I know about Tom, it was almost without doubt that he was the one to open the chamber, Augusta said, pulling her hand back and dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Anyway, after Tom graduated, he was offered all manner of jobs in the ministry, and to everyone's surprise took a job at Borgin and Burke's. Well, this was after he was turned down for the professorship of the Dada. Headmaster Dippet said he was too young and told him to reapply again when he was older. She continued, more composed now. She stopped to sip the ever-present tea, which he did, right before he disappeared, but Albus denied him the position. I don't know the reason why. Rumor has it that he was the one to cast the curse on the position. Can you imagine us or our kids being taught by Voldemort? James said with a full body shudder, just thinking about the horror that would be. The school might as well change its name to Durmstrang. Ah, Sirius said, a look of mock terror on his face. I can only think about how it had been treated, going against my family and all. Good thing that didn't happen then, Remus said. Then after a minute's thought he added, I would think that either I wouldn't have been invited at all or Morwers would have joined the student body. They all got thoughtful at that, and after a few minutes shook themselves and went back to the discussion. Yes, well, all I know is that after some shady deals that lead to a few deaths, he simply disappeared. No one I've talked to knows where he went. Then after about 20 years he came back, but he wasn't Tom anymore. No, now he was Voldemort. He kept a low profile for quite a while. There were some mysterious deaths and disappearances, but nothing the ministry could pin on him. Then you know what happened after that? Augusta finished, sitting back, indicating she was done. Well, that's more information than we had, Albert said, writing it all down. Try and find where he went if you can. We know his family comes from Little Hangleton, and if I am not mistaken, Team 1 has already been there, he said, looking at the forementioned team. Oh, we went, all right. Damn near lost our lives going there, exclaimed Wayne as he took out a lead box and placed it in front of him. Lily really came through on procuring those. The box gave off a dark aura, and no one wanted to touch it. That hovel his mum grew up in was riddled with traps. It took us 5 hours just to get this ring out. The rest of the team nodded in agreement. They hoped the rest of the Horcruxes weren't as secure. James leaned over the table and brought the box to him. He didn't look inside. He just set it next to his plate and continued with the meeting. So we now have 2 of his soul pieces, the necklace and the ring. Augusta, see if anyone can tell you if he tried to get heirlooms or special pieces that wouldn't really fit with Borgin and Burke's merchandise. It might give us clues as to what else we are looking for. Amelia, do you have a good standing with the goblins? He asked, turning to the head of the DMLE. Madam Bones had joined the group shortly after the fiasco with Quirrell and the stone. She realized that she had been mistaken about these people and took a vow, along with the rest of the group, to not reveal their secrets. Yes, she answered with a nod. It is amazing how much respect you get with goblins if you show that respect first. I am not at the top of the tier, so to speak, but I can get in touch with some of the higher-ranking goblins if I need to. Why? I'm thinking that Voldemort might have sent some of these Horcruxes with his followers. Do you think you can tell them that there might be cursed items in those vaults? and see if they can retain them or destroy them. I know in my agreement for my vault, I stated that I would never put an item in it that could harm the Goblin Nation. If what Lily says is correct, there is a possibility that one of these can possess a person and drain their soul and life too. I don't know. Create a new Voldemort, then there would be two dark wankers running around, he explained, and glanced around the table. The rest of the team nodded their heads in agreement. They had been warned it could happen and were taking all precautions to not touch the Horcruxes if at all possible. I'll warn them and ask them to let me know of the outcome, Amelia replied, already going over who to talk to and what to say without breaking her vow. That's a start, James said with a nod of his head. Okay, Lily has some great news for us. Well, as you know, we've been studying how to get rid of these things without being possessed ourselves, Lily started, going through her notes. We think we've found a way using the dust we used to expel Voldemort from Quirrell. The problem we were having is what happens to the soul piece once it's out of the container. The research I have says that once the container is destroyed, the soul piece dies, unless there's someone or something around for it to possess. Which was the main problem, how to kill the piece and not get taken over at the same time. Did you find a way? I mean, we can destroy the containers, and that would be a shame seeing as how they are ancient artifacts, but we can do it. I, for one, don't want to be the new Voldemort, Sirius laughed, though no one else did, so he stopped. Rolling her eyes at the prankster, she continued, we're thinking of putting the container in a warded room and using a fan to blow the dust to it. That way, when the soul piece comes loose, it will float around for a few seconds, get caught in the wards, and die soon after. That, my dear wife, is simply brilliant, James said, getting up and hugging and kissing his wife. You too, Albert, simply brilliant, but I'm not kissing you. Everyone laughed for a minute and then got serious again, and he retook his seat. On another topic, what are we going to do about Skeeter? The second trial was a good start, and she's backed off for the moment. But we all know she will be back with a vengeance, Remus asked, always worried about his family. I don't know why that woman hates us so much, Lily said in disgust, nose wrinkled as if she smelled something bad. I mean, we've never done anything to her. You denied her a story, Augusta said simply. How many times did you turn her down before she started printing untruths about you? But after what they said about us, we turned down everyone, Lily said in a defensive voice. And they had, well after they realized that no one was listening to them in the first place. They had given a few interviews about what happened that night and were vilified in the paper as an unreliable source. They even gave one to Skeeter at the beginning, and her story was the most vicious. Ah, but our dear Miss Skeeter feels she is special and should never be denied a story. That is why she makes things up about people. Her column was well sought. Before the crystals were sold, her words were taken as truths. Now, after your lawsuit, and the people are now thinking with more rational minds, she is on the low end of the totem pole. And she blames you, Miss Longbottom stated, tapping her finger on the table to emphasize her point. Well, back to what we do about her. Gary thinks she's an animagus. He has all the mutineers looking out for her at Hogwarts, James said in a proud voice. He then turned to Amelia and asked, is there anything you can do? Not unless we catch her. I don't have a way to check everyone who comes into the ministry to see if they are illegal animagus. Besides, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black of you and your friend here? Amelia inquired with a raised eyebrow, looking between the two marauders. James and Sirius blushed at the question. It was true they still hadn't registered, and now that they had important work to do, they didn't plan on it. Padfoot would be invaluable at getting into places humans can't. Prongs might not work quite as well, but you never know. Remus just chuckled. He had warned them ages ago that their secret might get out. It was a good thing they all took that vow. Yeah, well, we promised that once Voldemort is gone for good, we'll register, Sirius said seriously. He knew it had to come to that, and he didn't want his friend in the DMLE to be caught ignoring the law. Thank you, was all Amelia said. The meeting broke up soon after with no way of controlling Skeeter. They put the problem with Rita on the back burner and all decided to ward their homes against Animagus so as to not be caught unaware. As they were leaving, James reminded them of the party the Potters were throwing on Boxing Day. He got the confirmations, and the group soon left. The same day, Hogwarts, study hour in the Great Hall. The mutineers and all their study buddies were at the Hufflepuff table doing their homework. Harry and Gary were sitting with the Pattle twins, Susan and Hannah. They were talking about the Dada professor who had taken over for Quirrell since he was too traumatized to teach. Her name was Professor Lauren Steele. She was a retired Aura who only agreed to teach for this year. She was a very pretty older lady of 45, slender with blonde hair and blue eyes. She had retired early due to injury and was quite happy in her solitude. She was actually pretty good, and they were learning a lot. The problem was that she was a boy who lived fan and would treat Gary special. Said boy was getting tired of it and complaining. I can't seem to make her stop, Gary grumped, slouched in his seat and arms folded across his chest. I've tried and tried to get her to see that I'm just a student, but she keeps going on and on about how powerful I must be to have taken on such a powerful dark wizard. Poor Gary, Susan said mockingly, patting him on the head. While she did sympathize with her friend, it was funny to watch the woman fawn all over him in class. Whatever will you do? A pretty woman praising you over your every word and movement. You think it's funny, but have you seen some of the looks I'm getting from some of the other students? They're starting to think I'm not earning my grades. It's embarrassing, he defended himself. This was just the type of thing that he and Harry were hoping to avoid. It could only end badly in the long run. Maybe you should talk to McGonagall and see if you can't get independent grading. She can make an announcement or something, Padma suggested. She too had seen the glares thrown Gary's way during study hall. Maybe, but I think Dumbledore will try and stop that. He seems to want the world to think I'm all-powerful and stuff, Gary said thoughtfully. What do you think, Harry? I think you should at least try. Harry glanced his way with an encouraging look. Or maybe you can get one of the new ghosts to haunt her and give her lectures about harassing students. Hannah giggled at her own suggestion. That would be a sight, a ghost following a professor around and preaching about proper teaching. The rest of the group around her chuckled and giggled at the image. Seriously, though, what am I going to do? I don't want people thinking I'm getting privileges that I'm not. Then again, I have no idea if she is grading me up or not. Should I complain to the board? Or my parents? Can they do anything? I'm getting tired of it. Plus, she keeps bad-mouthing Harry in front of the class. She keeps telling me that I'm letting him hold me back, which she can't prove, because his grades are as good as if not better than mine. He is in Ravenclaw for crying out loud. Gary continued his rant, pouting and wildly gesturing the whole time. The group could tell this was really bothering him, but didn't know what to do, except tell McGonagall. Maybe a letter to the board wouldn't be a bad idea. You will just have to word it correctly, Padma said, thinking about just how to do that. Be professional and try not to sound like you are whining. I can do that, Gary said with resignation. He hadn't wanted to write to them because no matter how he worded it, it would come off as asking for a favor. I think I'll go to McGonagall first. She seems to want to help. He gathered his books and notes and stuffed them into his bag and went to his head of house's office. He knocked on the door and went in when he heard enter. Good afternoon, Professor, Gary greeted her as he took the chair in front of the well-organized desk his teacher was sitting at. Good afternoon, Mr. Potter. What brings you to my office? McGonagall asked after putting her grading aside. I'm having a problem, which really isn't a problem. You see, Professor Steele is giving me special treatment in class, and she's bad-mouthing Harry. I need it to stop. It's causing me difficulties with the other students, Gary said, after he put his bag on the floor. One of the reasons it is causing issue is they think I'm not being graded fairly. She goes on and on about how good I am when I don't even do any better than the rest of the class. Is there any way her class can be, I don't know, monitored in secret or something? I mean, I know she's only here until the end of the year, but she is creating a breach with the rest of the first years, and I don't know how to fix it. He was actually close to tears with frustration. I had heard something along those lines, and heard Professor Steele claim what a good student you were, however. I didn't know she was quite that biased, McGonagall said, her forehead crest with worry over one of her cubs. I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise you anything. Fortunately, your class is in one of my off periods. I can monitor it because I am the deputy headmistress. I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention and not trying to fix it yourself. Your parents will be proud, she said with a nod of her head and a slightly pitied look in her eyes. Okay, thanks, Professor. I'll wait and see what happens, but if you can't solve it, I'm taking it to the board, the messy-haired preteen stated firmly. Off you go, back to study hall with you. "Leave it to me, Mr. Potter," the deputy headmistress stated firmly, not wanting any more issue with the board. "Bye, Professor," Gary said as he gathered up his bag and went out the door. He headed back to the great hall and rejoined the group. He relayed what she said, and with nods all around they went back to their homework. The next day during the Dada, they were working on the tripping jinx. Everyone was still trying to get it right, and Gary was downplaying his ability, especially in this class, and was fumbling right along with everyone else. After about 10 minutes, 3 other students got it correct and were awarded 2 points each. Gary felt this was a good time to do his right, so he did and was awarded 10 points, with the added comment that his brother was holding him back or he would have been first. The glares he received made him blush with embarrassment. Then out of the shadows stepped Professor McGonagall. Never in all my years of teaching, with exception of one other, have I seen such a blatant act of bias. Tell me, Professor Steele, why did you award Mr. Potter more points than the other students? He was not even the first to achieve the goal. And why are you bad-mouthing a student that isn't even in your class? She asked, looking over the top of her glasses and tapping her feet in agitation. She thought Gary was over-exaggerating. But now she could see he was not. He is the boy who lived. He deserves the extra points. His brother must be the reason he is not doing well. It was in the prophet after all, the woman said, truly confused as to why that would even be questioned. McGonagall sighed. Mr. Potter is a student, nothing more. If this is how you award points to him, all of his test and homework will need to be regraded to make sure he is receiving correct marks. His brothers as well, to make sure you are grading him fairly. You will desist awarding him points at all unless he is the first to achieve whatever task assigned. You will leave his brother alone. I will be monitoring the award sheet from now on. The Transfiguration professor glared at the younger woman. Gary gave a huge sigh of relief and said, "Thank you, Professor. I've been telling her that for ages." "It is not a problem, Mr. Potter. It is good you came to me to discuss this. The rest of you should also go to your head of house if you see something like this happen again. Mr. Potter has expressed time and time again that he and his brother wants no special treatment. You should heed his words and not words of gossip," the head of Gryffindor chastised the class. Some bent their head in shame. They had heard him complain about the special treatment he was receiving, but figured he was doing that to save face. But, he is the boy who lived. He saved us all, the flabbergasted reply came. Professor Steele did not understand why a hero wasn't being treated as he should. "Professor Steele, please keep your worship out of the classroom." McGonagall could see this was something that went far beyond a little bias. This woman could start a cult if she wanted to. It was a good thing they only had to put up with her one more term. Christmas was coming soon. Maybe she could talk to Albus about finding someone else. The professor's proclamations also showed the other students just how nuts their teacher was. They decided to start looking beyond the gossip from now on. Gary's and Harry's test and homework were regraded, and Gary lost a few marks, and Harry gained a few, but nothing too bad. The professor continued to lavish praise on his poor head. However, she couldn't award points, because Gary made sure he was never first. She never spoke ill of Harry after being berated in front of her class. She didn't want to get fired over some mediocre first year. McGonagall couldn't get the headmaster to see that something was wrong with the woman. He seemed to think the boys were being treated fairly, and nothing she showed him would sway his opinion. So she resigned herself into keeping an eye out. Chapter 27. A Yuletide Celebration. And thanks to my betas, Daryl Deem and Alex 33, for checking this over. All mistakes are my own, especially since I have a bad habit of adding things and not sending it back to them. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP, December 26, 1991. It was just after 3 p.m., and the Potters were all dressed up in their finest waiting for their guests to arrive. Lily and Harry were in the flu room, and James and Gary were at the front door. Sirius and Remus were in ballroom to show those who entered where they could sit or what was on the buffet table. It wasn't the first party they had, but there were a few politicians that were coming that had never been invited before. One was the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, who had told them he could only stay for a short while, because he was also invited to the Malfoys. The manor was decked out in simple holly, ivy, and mistletoe wreaths. There were also laurels and bells swathed along the ceilings. Candles were floating all about the halls and in the ballroom and dining room. Gold and white cloths were draped on all the tables, with food, drink, and elaborate Christmas crackers scattered for anyone to choose from. Music crystals filled the air with dance music for those who wanted to make use of the ballroom. James wore an open-front plain black robe over a black suit with white button-up shirt and bow tie, which he kept fussing with. Gary and Harry were just as formal in identical dark blue suits with light blue button-up shirts and dark blue boaties sans robes. Lily was wearing a floor-length formal salmon gown, which was a simple cut of tight bodice and straight skirt, with a lavender open-front robe. The Potters were never about flair. They were down-to-earth folks that once in a while dolled up, but that was it. Finding them out of their jeans and T-shirts was a hard-pressed thing to do. Well, except for school and going to the Wisengamot, but those were uniforms, so they didn't count. The way they dressed tonight might offend some of their guests, because though they did look elegant, the clothes they wore were a mix of muggle and wizard. However, that was the statement they wanted to make, so it was okay if some old biddy's sensibilities were ruffled. As long as they were polite and didn't say anything offensive, they should be okay. A few carriages started pulling up, the flue started flaring, pops of apparition could be heard, and some people were walking up the pathways, and there was even a car or five. The guests had arrived. James and Gary greeted each person with a handshake or kiss on the hand, depending male or female. They would then have a house elf show them to the ballroom. Lily would kiss cheeks and Harry would do the handshakes or knuckle kisses. After about an hour, the door was left manned by Tilly, the house elf, and the Potters joined their guests. The flue was manned by the other house elf, Taffy. As they entered the ballroom, they took flutes of champagne or butterbeer, and James cast the sonorous and said in a soft voice, so it didn't sound like he was yelling, "Happy Christmas and thank you, one and all, for joining us to celebrate. I hope your festivities went well yesterday and that all your wishes came true. Please, feel free to take part in the buffet, the wassail or champagne. Mingle, dance, and have fun. Thank you." He silenced the spell and started to talk among his peers. Lily joined the mothers that were gathered together, and the twins made a beeline for the mutineers. "So, how long do we have to stay with the adults?" Spencer asked. He was a quiet boy who had been with the Potters all through primary. He was slotted for Ravenclaw when he went to Hogwarts next year. "Dad said at least until dinner," Harry answered, and was greeted with a lot of moans and groans for his trouble. "Good news is that's in about a half an hour." This brought smiles to the kids' faces. "Yeah, so try not to fill up now. Besides, we'll get real snacks when we get to the game room," Gary added with a smirk. "I should warn you that a lot of adults might be coming in and out all night. Not everyone invited has ever seen the room, so no talking about mutineer stuff," he added with a wink. Nods or confused looks were given at that little tidbit. "What kind of mutineer stuff shouldn't we talk about?" Leanne asked curiously. She was part of the pro-Dumbledore group, so wasn't privy to a lot of information. "You know, stuff that would bore the adults," Parvati improvised, "like our study group or homework. Boring stuff. We should keep it to what's going on at the school and what's new in fashion. By the way, I love that dress. Where did you get it? I wish I could pull off something like that," she fawned, leading the topic to fashion. "Or we could talk about what we got for Christmas, but right now we have to be formal and talk with the adults." Padfoot said, "Let them pick the topic and try and stay polite," Harry said with a bored look. He hated politicians, as they always toadied over Gary and ignored him, like an 11-year-old would boost their career. "We should rejoin our parents now and regroup after dinner," Padma said, grabbing her sister's hand, and started weaving through the crowd. The kids split up and did just that. This time, Gary joined his mum and Harry went reluctantly to James. His dad was surrounded by the old geezers from the Wisengamot, and Harry knew it was going to be a boring wait. "Oh, and this must be young Gary," a portly man holding a bowler hat said as Harry approached. Harry had to wonder why he didn't give the hat to the house elves. James took a quick look at the scar and said, "No, Minister, this is his twin Harry. Harry, say hello to the Minister." "Hello, Minister Fudge. How are you this evening?" came the reply as Harry politely held out his hand in greeting. Very well indeed," Fudge said, shaking the hand vigorously. It is not every day one gets invited to the Potters, no, not every day. A good evening indeed. Thank you for asking, young Harry, he said, not showing his disappointment about meeting the wrong twin. He didn't want to alienate James, because though he took Malfoy's money, Potter could drum him right out of office. This man single-handedly had half the Wisengamot in his pocket without spending a nut to do it. With the greeting out of the way, Fudge turned back to James and said, "Well, it has been a delightful time. I really must be off. I told Lucius that I would be there for dinner and I mustn't be late." James shook the minister's hand and said, "It was a pleasure having you, Cornelius. Perhaps next year you could stay for dinner with us." "Perhaps," the minister said, and putting on his bowler he left. At 4:30 a house elf came and informed them that dinner was served. When you first walk into the room, you were greeted with two long tables, dressed up in white and gold tablecloths, with candelabras spaced between every 6 chairs. Each table could hold 25 people. In the back of the room were two smaller tables with glass globes instead of stands. Thank Merlin for expanding charms. Dishes set around the tables consisted of roast turkey, goose, chicken, and duck, served with stuffing and gravy, pigs in blankets, devils on horseback, roasted chestnuts, cranberry sauce and red currant jelly, bread sauce, boiled, mashed and roast potatoes, Brussels sprouts and parsnips. Everyone exclaimed over the lovely setup as they took their seats, and soon light talk was heard all around the tables. Mothers talked of child-rearing, other women talked of fashion, and the men talked of work or Quidditch. The kids keep it to fashion and schoolwork. Soon pudding appeared, and this entailed trifle, mince pies, Christmas cake and pudding, brandy butter, cream for the kids, and a Yule log. Soon everyone's bellies were full, and the diners divided into groups and went to separate sitting rooms, while some couples made use of the dance floor, commenting on the handiness of the crystals and the wonder of the beautiful waltzes that were playing. The children went to the game room. Most lost their robes, jackets, and ties upon entering. There were only 2 or 3 kids there that weren't part of the mutineers, and the gang had no problem showing them what everything in the room was for. Gary, Harry, Padma, Neville, Susan, and Mandy were all grouped on the couches. "Thanks for the broom, you guys. You didn't have to get me one, you know. The book on the Amazon jungle was enough. Besides, I already have 2, Neville said with a smirk. The Potter twins had bought everyone in the mutineers, and Dean, Ron, and Seamus a broom. You know how it is, one group present and then special ones. We even bought Ron and Seamus one, so they couldn't complain that we were sucking up to their siblings. Well, not Seamus, but can you imagine the complaining we would hear if he was the only one in the dorm not to get one? I mean, even Dean got one, Gary explained with a twinkle in his eye. Besides, it's not like they're top of the line or anything. They're only comet sweeps, huffed Harry. Yeah, I heard the Weasley twins complain how hard it was to play Quidditch on their old brooms, so, Gary said with a shrug. You two are so thoughtful. I, for one, am glad for the new broom. Auntie wouldn't let me get one until next year. She still won't let me take it to school, but I rode it all day yesterday. So thanks from me too, Susan said as she gave a hug to each boy. I really don't like flying, Padma said with a small lift of her shoulder, but I know brooms can be useful, so thanks. Did you enjoy the books we sent you? Harry asked. Yes, came 4 responses. That one you sent me on Wicca tradition was really good. I was up all night reading it. Even after all we've learned on the internet, there is still so much about that religion that I don't know, Mandy said with a bright smile. She was always interested in other cultures and could be found on the computer most of the time. Her parents had to lock the study in their home at night, so she would not stay up all night researching. I think that is because it is still so new and is still evolving, Padma guessed, tapping her finger on her chin in thought. I know it comes from an old religion, but they are trying to adapt it to modern times. Let's not talk religion, Gary suggested, holding up his hands. If there was one thing he learned about parties, it was never talk about religion or politics. I'm going to go and show the 2 new kids what a computer is for. Why don't you guys talk about the rest of you gifts? And with that, he got up and wandered over to the 2 lost-looking teens that were just standing off to the side like they were afraid to touch anything. As he approached the 2, he held out his hand and greeted them. Hi. I'm Gary Potter, he said, ignoring the gasp and the quick looks at his scar. Welcome to Potter Manor. Hello, I'm Lewis Hockenstamp, and this is my sister Ellie. Our grandfather knows your father from the Wisengamot. He was ever so ecstatic for being invited, the tall boy said, taking Gary's hand. May I ask, what is all this stuff? Waving at all the gadgets, TVs, and computers. Well, I don't know if you were told, but this is a magic null room. It's where we play games, do our homework, watch movies, or just cruise the internet. Here, let me show you the computer, he said, and taking their elbows, gently guided the nervous siblings to the computer area. As you can see, we have 5 computers. We used to have more, but when people started setting up their own rooms, we gave a few to charity. Here, sit here, Lewis and Ellie, you stand behind him, he suggested, setting them on the farthest computer away from the other kids. Okay, I'm going to turn it on, and a picture is going to show on this blank-looking glass. So don't freak out or anything, Gary said, as he pushing in the power buttons, then sat in the chair next to Lewis. You could hear the static fill the air as the screen came on, causing the 2 purebloods to jump. Oops, sorry, I forgot about that part. It's just the screen receiving electricity. After a minute, a login screen came to view, and Gary put in the username and password. Then a nice Christmas picture filled the screen, a country house in the snow. Okay, just let me pull up the internet, and I will show you how cool this is. Once the Explorer window popped up, he said, Name one thing about Muggles you always wanted to know. I always wanted to know how they dressed. So, I can blend in when we go out to the Muggle world. Not that we've done that yet, but it might happen, Ellie said, twisting her hands in front of her, not wanting to sound petty to the boy who lived. Very smart. You'd be surprised at how some wizards dress. Gary smiled at the flustered young teen. Okay, so I'm thinking you want modern teen girl fashion. Here, let me pull it up, he said, typing away in the search bar. A few seconds later, links started to fill the monitor. Gary explained what they were and how to click on them, and guided them to one that stated it was for school fashion. After clicking the link, the page showed girls in jeans, slacks, and casual shirts. Ellie looked on with wonder, leaning over her brother's shoulder to get a closer look. Then Gary showed her how to get back to the search page and linked her to summer dresses. While she was getting into the clothes, Gary took Lewis to another computer and showed him the Muggle sports. He watched the 2 play on the internet until their parents came and pulled them away. He told them about libraries, and if they couldn't get computers of their own, they could go there. Gary rejoined Harry and said, 2 more into the fold. Harry laughed and smacked his twin's shoulder. Come on, the party is breaking up, and we have to put our ties and jackets back on and see the guests out, he said, picking up his jacket and tie. Gary groaned, but joined him all the same. This time Lily and Gary were manning the door, while James and Harry were attending the flu room. Sirius and Remus had already left to go and party at the pubs. Soon enough it was just the Potters, and they all climbed the stairs wearily and got ready for bed. Lily went into Gary's room and sat on his bed. Did you have a good night? She asked, brushing the hair from his forehead, wishing he would still let her hug and kiss him good night. Yeah, Gary replied tiredly. I think I got 2 more purebloods hooked on computers. Really? Who? The Hawkinstamps, I think. The boy is in Hufflepuff, a few years above me and Harry. The girl is in Ravenclaw, a year above us. They said their grandpa works with Dad. Yes, I remember meeting him tonight, and you might be right. He was asking about our Muggle stuff. I'm tired, Mum. It is a good thing Sally let us have a few days off. Too bad she doesn't celebrate the holidays. Good night, Gary. Don't forget your crystal. Soon you guys will be ready for your animagus training. Did the mutineers ever vote on that? Lily asked, still stroking his hair. Yeah, we all decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass on, Gary said, with a yawn as he rolled over and started his crystal. Lily got up and gave his forehead a quick kiss and left before he could complain. She met James in the hall and leaned tiredly against him. He put his arm around her waist and pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Poor Lilyflower, all tuckered out. It was only a party. How did you get so tired? Do you realize how boring most of those people are? There's only so much fashion I can talk about. I don't even like witches' fashion, she complained, using her free arm to smack his chest. She gave a yawn and then said, Gary said they voted on trying animagus training. I was thinking this summer. I'll get with Padfoot and we'll set up a schedule, James said, kissing her hair again. Come on, sweetheart, let's get you to bed. A big yawn was his answer as he guided her to their bedroom, and as he closed the door, he couldn't help but think that it was a successful party. HPHPHPN. I once again want to reiterate that I brought the internet up to modern times so that the Potters can do what Gary did.